Sure thing. Michael Blakley, I'm the co-founder of Equitas. We are an interview intelligence platform, and we've created the fairest way to conduct live interviews. So the way that we do this is we give companies frameworks to interview with, we help them capture their interview data, and we upskill their interviewers to deliver the best interview every time that they're interviewing. They love us because they never have to take notes whenever it comes to interviews ever again. Before Equitas, I spent my time as an interview specialist. So I did 10,000 plus interviews all across the UK. So London, Belfast, Scotland, you name it, for a load of different companies like B-Sky-B, Transport for London, a lot of public sector contracts as well on top of that. So there's maybe not a government department in the UK that I haven't recruited for at some point. Thought there had to be a better way to interview, so that's why we built Equitas. So the best way to stay up to date with trends is to go to conferences, follow thought leaders in the space. You also need to talk to the recruitment experts. And one that a lot of people miss out on is not speaking to enough early stage companies that are in the HR and recruitment tech space as well. So for the thought leaders, Hung Lee would be number one. He has a weekly brain food newsletter. Definitely follow Hung if you're not already on that newsletter. Also has a webinar every Friday that's incredible. Louise Triance, she's an incredible influencer within the UK, as is Rob Green. They're both creating some quality content for recruiters. Katrina Collier's LinkedIn newsletter is pretty epic as well. Tongue in cheek, a bit of humor in there, which always helps. And there's probably too many conferences to name for you. So a couple of key ones within the UK, the IHR, In-House Recruiters, and also REC, Recruitment Events Company, who run RecFest. Those are two companies I would definitely follow, attend their events. And then the last set of influencers that I would definitely get in your network are Jim Beresford, and then Alan and Jeremy over at Utter, but probably too many people to name on this call. So the two key ones that we've heard from everyone we've been speaking to in the space are attracting and identifying qualified talent, so people who have the right skill set to be able to do the job. And the other biggest one that they're facing is building diverse teams as well. So two pretty tough challenges to deal with at the same time. DEI is super important. It's been neglected by a lot of organizations over the last, I'd say years, it's probably decades now, if I'm being honest. So there is a chance for any recruiters coming through to start with a blank slate and fresh slate and help those companies that they're working with redefine the way that they hire, not just in technology, but in process as well. On the attraction piece, you should always be looking at new technology as well to make sure you're getting a diverse range of candidates that come in top of the funnel all the way through as well. There's some cool tools within the UK to check out, things like Adway, Crouton, Get Optimal. They're all tools that you should have a bit of a look into. And what you should encourage employers to do is go away from lengthy, outdated hiring processes. So reducing that speed they offer, getting them to do less interviews, 6+ rounds of interviews. Candidates are just going to go looking somewhere elsewhere. So you got to help the employers reduce the amount of interviews that they're doing. So my number one tip for any recruiters is spend more time on your job advert than you normally would do. So that way you're actually going to attract the right candidates for the role, even if it means that there's less applying. Make sure that you use some level of inclusive language. And again, there's tools to help you do that, but you can do a lot of research and making sure that you're writing that copy and content in the right way. A hack that I love, and you don't even need to use tools to be able to do this, you just need more than one of you, is blind screening. So this will help you minimize bias, get rid of things like the CV. It is going to be redundant in the long run. And if you ask people a few screening questions and make it completely anonymous as well, you're going to get the best people through to the next round, the next stage as well. Whenever you're assessing candidates, make sure motivation, and that's the one key, and it's probably going to come up in a couple of your questions. Make sure you're asking good questions around that and motivation for the role, the company. And if you've got that and well-defined scoring, it makes your life so much easier. And the last one, I would definitely keep a streamlined interview process as well to make sure you're nice and efficient and not interviewing the candidates to death. So I could talk to you about this all day, because structured interviews is what I've built my career around, and it's what I do now with Equitas. Is I introduce that level of structure with companies. So at a really high level, just split it into two at a minimum. Do a role-related interview. So do they have the abilities, the skills, to actually do the role day to day? On the other side of it, something that's becoming more and more popular is values-based interviewing as well. Do they have values that will align with the company, or could they even add to those values on top of it as well? A concept that we've kind of coined, and using things like maybe Recruit CRM or Equitas, is there are ways to automate all parts of that setup, the process as well. So make sure you're using the technology to keep it super streamlined. But a term that we coined was also an asynchronous panel interview. So what you need to do on top of that is not have all of your interviewers in the room at the same time, or have a candidate speaking to multiple interviewers time and time again, asking the same question. What you need to do is capture your interview data and have multiple people scoring that, and it actually reduces bias as well. So what that means is you've got someone who hasn't seen the candidate scoring them on audio, scoring them on transcription, which is brilliant because things like beauty bias don't creep in there as well. And it means that rather having those 4, 5, 6 interview processes, you can do just 1 or 2. You can do a role-related interview, you can do a values interview, see if they've got that motivation on top of it as well. And I actually am a big fan of scenario-based questions. So yes, there's tons of people who love competency-based questions, and they're good, and they will help you find some really good quality people. And you can ask past examples for competency. You can also ask scenario-based ones in terms of how you score them. But those hypothetical scenario-based questions can show whether someone's got the potential to do the role or not as well, and show a bit of their problem solving, how to think. But I'll stop myself there, otherwise we'll be talking about interviews all day long. I've been there. Like, I went freelance recruiting and I knew not as much about the role as I should have done. So my past life, I was an area manager for Aldi, and I left, set up my own recruitment agency and started recruiting directly from them. So the amount of mistakes I've made in the early days are insane. And like, early on, there was this over-reliance on CVs and using them to assess candidates, and this bias that could creep in by looking at similar companies and thinking, oh, you know, candidates must be good. It is one of the most simple kind of biases that you see, especially in tech. You have people who look at Facebook or Meta or Google and think, oh, they must be good, let's put them through, and deselecting other candidates as well. So don't have this over-reliance on the CV or really overrate past employers. Some of them will be good, trust me, but what you can do is speak to more candidates than you think as well. So if you're using cover letters, if you are using those anonymous application questions as well, they're fantastic, because people don't always look great on paper. Whenever you interview and get speaking to them and asking those probing questions that we chatted about, they'll be perfect fits for the role as well. And a lot of the UK providers and people who are in the HR tech scene are talking about the CV dying out at some point, which will be interesting if it does, because there's been some incredible research that shows that people can look at names and will deselect based on people's names, or they'll have to apply for more jobs as well. So yeah, some frightening research in the over-reliance on CVs and all the dangers that can come from it. So yeah, you got to be open-minded early on in your career. So ghosting is always going to happen. You just have to not take it personally. You have no idea what's going on in that person's life. If it's a candidate, they could have a million different job opportunities coming in. It could be family, it could be work, it could be anything. So just do not take it personally. Be polite, persistent, and then move on. Afterwards, especially if it's a candidate that gets in the process and they drop out and they ghost you, you can always ask why and give them enough breathing space and time to do that. And what I always advise clients to do with Equitas whenever they see this happen is you should analyze your process afterwards as well. Was it interview fatigue? Real thing for both candidates and interviewers alike. Did you have too many rounds? Was there another reason the candidate ghosted you? Could be anything. So yeah, don't prejudge and don't jump to conclusions and make those assumptions. Just move on, and then try and analyze afterwards if you can. So it would definitely come back to motivation, motivation for the role, motivation for the team, motivation for the mission that the company's on as well. If they have done their research, there is a good chance that they actually want to work there. Whereas if they haven't, they probably don't. That would be an immediate red flag for me whenever we're hiring internally. And I've never stopped the candidate whenever I've asked them the question, tell me what you know about the organization or the company and the role, because it's fascinating to hear what they're thinking, what they're talking about, what their take is on it, because it is literally live feedback on your job advert as well. If you get them talking and you can see, hey, how deep have they gone? Where have they found stuff? I've had candidates dig out articles from like 2-3 years ago that I didn't even know existed were on the internet, which is pretty impressive as well. The other red flag, if they say they aren't a team player, run for the hills. I'm joking, of course, there, but for early stage companies, you need people who are super flexible and really good collaborators as well. So that's one that we always ask around whenever it comes to our structured interviews. And yeah, we're always going to have follow-up questions to make sure that they'd be able to work well with others and not expect to shut themselves off completely. Be more transparent than ever before. So it's what candidates want, it's what they expect, and the more that you share, the more that they're going to respect you either as a recruiter or as an employer on top of that as well. So whenever I'm talking about sharing, if you can give them questions that you're going to ask up front, if you can tell them the length, duration, stage of processes, who they're going to speak to as well, if you can give them as much feedback as humanly possible. And I even, with our tool, we say, hey, share the interview transcripts with them so they can go away and work on what they said and improve if they didn't get the role. And then the last point that we've already talked about is, hey, streamlined interview process and make sure you're using async panel interviews if you can, and just save everyone in the process as much time, because the candidates will love you for it. There's probably more chance of them actually accepting an offer if you have that super tight streamlined process.